Hello and welcome to Dialogue. The ancient Chinese capital Xi'an has just wrapped up hosting the first China-Central Asia Summit. Leaders of China and Central Asian states, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan exchanged views on how to strengthen cooperation among them in the new era. What milestone had the summit achieved? What do closer China-Central Asia relations mean for the region and beyond? To answer these questions and more, I'm glad to be joined by Professor Wang Jin from the Northwest University of China, Zoon Ahmed Khan, Research Fellow of the Center for China and Globalization, and Einar Tangen, independent current affairs commentator. That's our topic. I'm Xu Qinduo. Welcome to Dialogue. I know you have been following the big event, the first summit between China and the 5 Central Asian states closely. So what's your biggest takeaway after the leaders of the 6 countries gathered in Xi'an, for the China Central Asia Summit? Wang Jin, that's your city. I will start with you. What's your biggest takeaway?
First of all, I feel very proud because this is a very, very important political event held in Xi'an and very near to me, and I feel kind of proud. I feel even a little bit arrogant because this is the very first time that such a big political event held in my city. And also, I think this event is very meaningful and important to China and as well as to the Central Asian states. They are our neighbors, and this is the very first, this kind of style multilateral summit held between China and Central Asian countries. So I think the meeting itself is very important, and for the city Xi'an, this is very important. For the resident, as a resident of Xi'an, I feel very proud, and I held a very, very positive believes that the prospect for the multilateral exchanges and the cooperation between China and Central Asians will be very, very bright and will be very, very prosperous in the future.
Zoon, so what stood out in your mind, when you see leaders, go together, facing the journalists and of course, the documents one after the other about the outcomes, about what they have achieved?
Well, firstly, thank you, Qinduo, for having me on the program. I will completely resonate with what the professor just said about the significance of this visit. We know that China-Central Asia relations are extremely important. As someone who's also studying the Belt and Road Initiative, since I started my China journey, the importance of the Central Asian countries in that vision of connectivity between continents, between countries, and between cultures is absolutely very high. And I'll also add quickly that I feel incredibly proud of Xi'an as well. I've recently, in the last couple of years, had the opportunity to visit Xi'an, visit the museums, and understand that the historic significance of Xi'an as the former capital and as the initiator of the Silk Road, which inspires this cooperation, is felt very strongly today. And I'll quote quickly also that one of the things that amazed me was how the museum staff that was showing us all of those artifacts and that heritage and history emphasized that Chang'an had 10% foreign population at its peak period. So the importance of exchange, cultural cooperation, understanding each other is very high. The significance of this visit, well, we know that even if we talk about the Belt and Road Initiative, Central Asian countries play a very vital role. We know that China and multilateral cooperation among regions, including, for example, FOCAC, has had very positive impact and have also helped regions collectively strategize what are their priorities as regions. So I think when we go into the major statements and also the cooperation aspects that are coming out, we see from agriculture, from infrastructure, from tourism, from mobilizing people, allowing people to travel between China and Central Asia, and otherwise, thinking about the domestically driven priorities and then synergizing the region as a whole is very important. So I think this is an example. This is a major step forward, and I think that this can set a trend for other regions as well to think about collaboration with China, because I think we all agree that regions prosper together. So this is an opportunity to expand on the synergy that the region has experienced since the mid 2000s, when initially the major investments and infrastructure development in Central Asia via China, because of China.
Well, there's a tech glitch over there. So Anna, if you look at this first summit between leaders of China and the 5 Central Asian nations, this is basically an upgrade from previously foreign ministers meeting every year. This is the first summit, and then they'll make it a regular mechanism. The leaders will meet every 2 years since now. And of course, if you look at the outcome, you see, basically cooperation basically in every area you can think of. So are we entering a new era of cooperation between China and the Central Asia countries here?
No, I think it's more of just a logical trend. Remember, this all began with the Belt and Road Initiative, which unlocked, especially these landlocked countries, gave them dry ports where they could get, their goods and resources to markets, not only China but elsewhere. Remember that the Belt and Road connectivity is 2 ways. It gives all of these countries many outlets, and I think that's been received very, very positively. On a geopolitical basis, I think it was very important that Xi Jinping was making it clear that everything that is necessary to protect territorial integrity, independence, respect for each of their country is the main goal of this kind of idea. So I think this assures them. And then economically, very important. Xi Jinping didn't talk about a framework. He actually put real dollars down, 22 billion with Kazakhstan alone for expanded pipeline and to ensure that they can develop a lot of their energy resources, not only just for the Chinese market, but elsewhere as well. So very, very important because it's solid steps, very, very different from what's happening in Hiroshima. And I think it's worth mentioning, at least symbolically, the difference between it. You have a meeting going on in Hiroshima, the scene of one of the worst humanitarian catastrophes in the world, that is talking about how to divide the world, whereas in Xi'an, you have this new Belt and Road Initiative, which is talking about how you can prosper more.
But differences over there. We will come back to that a little bit later. And Wang Jin, you mentioned the Xi'an, so the city where you are living. I want you to talk more about Xi'an, which is the starting point of the ancient Silk Road. When people talk about the Asian Silk Road, I think people refer to or think of this prosperity, a period of prosperity, stability, and a strong business across different regions, different countries. So well, we are having the summit in Xi'an, so probably that's also the idea of the leaders of the nations here to let's achieve that kind of prosperity, stability, and also close relationship.
Yes, I very, very strongly agree with you because Xi'an is a city not only important ancient city for China, but also a very, very city with very strong symbolic meaning to show that China's close and strong willingness to cooperate with the external countries, especially the Central Asian states, because we have to know that Xi'an. As just Zoon and other guests has already mentioned, that Xi'an was a very important capital city of China. And when we are talking about Xi'an, the city always reminds us of the very glorious histories inside China. For example, the Tang Dynasty, especially the Tang Dynasty. And when the Tang Dynasty was strong, Xi'an was even the very, very center, one of the very centers in the world. So when we are talking about the Xi'an, this is the symbolic for China's, not only for China's its own strong power, but also we are talking about the strong sense of inclusiveness, the strong sense of aspiration for more cooperation with the external world. And we're also talking about the peace that co-constructed between that time China, the town dynasty, as with the other neighboring country, the neighboring powers. So it's when we are talking about Xi'an, so especially the summit is held in Xi'an. So we hope to reconstruct the Silk Road, as you mentioned, and also that we hope to revitalize the old Silk Road into the new era to create the kind of the win-to-win or the mutual beneficial scenario for China and Central Asian states, as well for China and other states under the Belt and Road Initiative, based on co-shared and also the co-discussion principles. I think it is very meaningful and also will benefit everyone.
Well, Zoon, you earlier mentioned about synergizing development both in China and other regional countries here. Of course, President Xi Jinping in the keynote speech, he mentioned that he went into detail about how to build China Central Asia community with a shared future. He made some proposals on bringing the two sides together, expanding economic ties, to strengthening cultural exchanges and safeguarding regional peace. Tell us more about that, this community for shared future. It seemingly stresses very much about the sharing spirit and the common development here.
Very, very true, Chindo, absolutely correct. I think this concept of a community with a shared future is also, inspired by a sentiment that countries, especially global South countries, have felt that we do not want to be divided. We also talk, I'll bring here again, that Bandung spirit, the initial Bandung spirit, which was a key driver for countries that were considered global South, that still are, that we need to think about, we need to envision a way forward that is not about divisions, that is instead about pragmatic, real concerns, real priorities that regions and countries need to set for themselves. So I think, now, as we have entered we've seen a lot of changes in the 21st century. We have seen the rise of China. We have seen the rising importance within developing countries, within regions that were considered the periphery of the world, that they need to take, they need to have a sense of ownership. They need to have a sense of, they need to be respected, their territorial integrity, their domestically conceived path needs to be respected. All of these are very important concepts. And countries in today's world need to be thinking about the real challenges that they are facing as nations and as regions. So when President Xi talks about a community with a shared future, this is the entire emphasis. A stable, a prosperous, a safe Central Asia, a region where young people have increasing opportunities, where you have infrastructure development as well, that can mobilize the resources, mobilize opportunities, is absolutely significant. And also we know that Central Asian countries have really, not just Central Asian countries, developing countries, especially across the world, are deeply inspired by China's own journey. So I think when President Xi emphasizes the spirit, the vision, the perspective, and as Einar also mentioned, this is a natural trajectory. We have seen these developments step by step moving forward. And today is this summit is going to really consolidate that journey. It's going to further engage different aspects, different spheres of development that those countries, that Central Asian countries, have also been thinking about. So it's actually very detailed. They have, as I earlier mentioned, gone into even technical education, skills development, agriculture technology. More pledges have been made to invest in the infrastructure that Central Asia has also obviously needs, and also will further, strengthen Central Asia's position as a very important region that can connect China, Asia, and Europe. So these are all very important aspects. And I think I'll also just lastly add that this sentiment, the community with a shared future sentiment, that we as a global community prosper together, is important. It has been tried to, been subdued by certain countries that are, as again other panelists have mentioned right now, meeting with this idea that they want to continuously divide the world. And a community with a shared future is not only a refreshing, but a much needed a vision that countries resonate with.
Vision of inclusiveness. Anna, obviously, reminds me of, the community of shared future reminds me, the interview I had with the former Kyrgyzstan Prime Minister. He talked about, basically his advice, Central Asian nations need to jump on the opportunity of China building high-quality modernization drive. And now the key message, one of the key messages from Xi Jinping is basically to synthesize the modernization or the strategies, not only in China, but also with Central Asian nations. So we are expecting probably more linkage, more connectivity, and more development in Central Asia.
Yeah, Chinduo, it's across the board. Right now, China is the major destination for students coming to study from Central Asia. You're seeing tremendous amount of investment. GDP was up, trade was up 22% in the first quarter. And you start looking at the amount of investment and the fact that it's growing. And I think a lot of this has to do with the success of China and ASEAN. When countries, Central Asia looks at how well things are working there, they understand that China is not a hegemon. It is not coming in and imposing its value. It's offering trade, a very different proposition from other offers that they're getting currently. So I think that's the important part, that China has a model that it can point to that's been successful, that Belt and Road is working. And it instills confidence in other countries. But I said this is a very complex issue. It involves a lot of geopolitical issues, obviously. And China is trying to, pour water on what could be a smoldering set of flames. All of these countries are very nervous about what's happening in Ukraine. And I think China is saying, look, we stand squarely in this idea that there won't be any separatism, extremism, and we will stand behind you. The territorial integrity of countries was mentioned directly by Xi Jinping, and this is something that these countries wanted to hear.
Mm-hmm. Well, Anna, a follow-up question. You mentioned about, of course, basically the stability issue, sovereignty, territorial integrity, and these regions, obviously, for many countries, there are, let's say, ethnic issues, religious extremism sometimes, even terrorism, for example, from Afghanistan there, and of course, there's also an issue, a concern, let's say, external interference or the so-called color revolution. Xi Jinping mentioned the three forces, and also the countries need to work to resolve this regional security dilemma. Tell us, why is this a concern in the first place? In particular, like a color revolution or external interference in the region.
Well, you have the National Endowment for Democracy, which says that it's a nonprofit, but it's actually funded by the U.S. government and overseen by Congress. Their latest budget is $330 million, which is an annual budget. And that is to be used to, in essence, color revolution. They want to use that to, in essence, influence, as they would say. Other people would say they're looking for regime change. They're active in 90 countries, and including all of the countries that were mentioned. So they're pushing their point of view. The U.S. believes in American exceptionalism, that there is only one path and that the U.S. knows it and needs to lead everybody to it. I don't think the rest of the world, given recent history since World War II, believes that that's the case, especially if you're in Central Asia or the Global South.
Yes, stability is probably the prerequisite for development, for growth. Wang Jin, Xi Jinping also said that he talked about expanded trade and investment. In particular, for example, the construction of the Line D natural gas and more oil and gas trade with the region. China is important in terms of economic development and modernization for the Central Asian nations, trade. But of course, it's also equally important for China, this region, in terms of the resources, in terms of connectivity, given their geopolitical location, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because from China's perspective, the Central Asian are very crucial for the future development of China. Not only we are talking about the energy cooperation, because actually there has already been very close connection and cooperative connection and the network between China and Central Asian states, as you mentioned, the pipeline, and also as well for the gasolines, and maybe in the future more and more other natural resources cooperation between China and Central Asian states will be developed and explored. So I think the potential for the natural resources cooperation will be very great and will be very prosperous. And meanwhile, we also need to know that during the summit, as also that what we find out after this summit, they release a lot of the cooperation documents. That in these documents they encourage the more exchanges, people-to-people exchanges, and economic cooperations, tourism, and financial cooperation, and a lot of other aspects of the cooperation between China and Central Asian countries. I think these also suggest a very, very prosperous future between China and the Central Asian cooperation, and also will pave the way for a more broader and more brighter, more deeper cooperation levels between China and Central Asian countries. So that's why we call it the summit is important, and also we call that now the kind of the mechanism, multilateral mechanism, not only covering political issues, but also covering the economic, social, and cultural exchanges. That is a very, very important set of the mechanism, that framework that will pave the foundation for future better multilateral cooperation between China and Central Asian states.
Wang Jin, you mentioned about this mechanism. Of course, there are they will build basically this regular mechanism of meetings, of dialogue between at the minister level. Like my sense, my impression is like there are 8 or to 10 probably, or even more. Such a dialogue mechanism will be held between the two sides. I would say that's important. In addition to, of course, there's a 2-year interval of the summit in China or in Central Asia. So this regular dialogue, regular meeting among senior officials. Obviously, they are very serious in terms of developing a cooperation in a variety of regions between the two sides.
Yeah, yes, I think the different levels of the ministerial level meetings that has already been organized, has already been agreed to organize and to arrange in the future, will become the very, very important backbone for future cooperation between China and Central Asian states. Because when we are talking about the summit, okay, they are important. They are the highest leaders between the different nations. They came here to sit down to talk. That is for the political meaning. They are of course the political meaning are very great. But when we are talking about cooperation, that means this kind of the political goodwill that reached during the summit should be implemented through different ministries, through different governmental branches, establishments. So that needs the different levels of the ministerial summit or the ministerial meetings to implement this kind of the goodwill of the political cooperation, economic cooperation, financial cooperation, social cooperation, and other cultural cooperation into details. So that is why when we mentioned, and also we noticed that during this meeting, there has already become the consensus that in the future, yes, there has already been 8 or 9 ministerial level meetings in the future that has already been agreed to organize and arrange. But I think in the future, these kind of the ministerial level meetings will be further encouraged, and maybe more and more ministerial levels meeting between different other ministers will be organized. So that's why we call it the future cooperation between China and Central Asian states will be very positive. We are very confident about it. We are proud about it.
So there's a lot to look forward to, obviously. The Zoon, in terms of like people-to-people exchange or cultural exchanges, so we know that Kazakhstan, the largest nation in Central Asia, they will allow visa-free stays for up to 30 days for Chinese citizens. Of course, it's mutual. And you have Uzbekistan also approved 2 weeks visa-free travel for Chinese tourists. And Kyrgyzstan is working on a similar deal with the Chinese side. So we are going to see more exchanges for people from China visiting this region, and then vice versa. And probably that will facilitate facilitate the cultural exchanges and also investment, even all kinds of cooperation there.
Very, yeah, very true. I mean, I think this is honestly one of the most, if I say, a development that can really expedite that vision, that perspective that China Central Asia cooperation needs to and can indeed move to the next level. There we talk about the frequency and the quality and the ease with which people-to-people exchanges are being facilitated on both sides. So I think, I mean, imagine, if someone is just thinking of a Central Asian person sitting in Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, just thinks about, okay, I want to visit a certain XYZ city in China or a village, and think about, how we can work together. Being able to go easily is definitely going to facilitate, is going to proliferate the frequency with which people conceive opportunities and with which they can put them forward. So, and I think, anyways, tourism, people-to-people exchange, we are talking about an age where, people-to-people exchanges and contact are facilitating mutual understanding, mutual respect. And there is obviously, a lot to gain from that. Sitting here in Pakistan right now, for instance, I can see a lot of interest that businesses and other people have in visiting. And if that, if for Central Asian people this is easier, then we can see speeding up of a lot of the mechanisms, the work of the mechanisms that are being established. So we are talking about technical institutions, capacity building of people. We are talking about even how China, I think one very important aspect for countries in Central Asia and the West Asian region at large is how China has created very positive spaces and development of the rural areas as well. How the culture of different ethnic groups within China has not only been promoted, encouraged, but has created industries that are empowering those communities in a way that was unprecedented. So I think people-to-people exchanges obviously go a very long way. And in the end, when we talk about people-centric development, the core purpose, the core idea is to empower and to invest in people. And I think this is definitely going to lead to that.
It's about the people. So Einar, you earlier mentioned about this, Hiroshima, the G7 summit there. If you take a look or simple comparison, you do see like this, summit in Xi'an, it offers, or features basically inclusiveness, common development, win-win cooperation. It offers a vision of a common community of a shared future. But G7 summit seems, focusing on their either so-called economic coercion by China or more sanctions on Russia. It's like a bloc against another bloc, or dividing the world into different camps. What do you make of that?
Well, it's an unfortunate reality. The U.S. feels threatened by China's rise, and they have a containment policy. Today, they announced that they're deepening economic cooperation with Taiwan. It's always seems one day it's one step forward, two steps back. But this G7 is clearly aimed at China. It's actually, if you start looking at it, it's kind of the old guard. It's the colonial powers gathered together, very wealthy, but increasingly less relevant. You have the G20 had to save things from the financial crisis in 2008 and 9. And today, even the G20 can't seem to pull everyone together, although we've had pandemics, we have an economic situation on the verge of catastrophe, and we have obviously climate change issues. So, you have the old guard trying to hold on to whatever it is they think they have, whereas you have China pushing ahead, very focused, 5 countries, saying, look, here's a model of how we can work together. And it's all based on those 3 pillars that Xi Jinping has been talking about: the Global Security Initiative, the Global Development Initiative, and the Global Civilization Initiative. They stand for, very simply, security, respect, and trade.
Well, a different vision, a vision of a community of shared future, and a vision of cooperation, or basically more conflicts or more confrontation. That's a difference. With that, we come to the end of today's show. Many thanks to our guests. You can also find us on the CGTN app on YouTube. Thank you for being with us. I'm Xu Qinduo. See you next time.